Hey guys, thanks for joining another Optimized Real Estate podcast. Today I'm on with Don Costa of Flip Talk, and he has a coaching business, a mastermind. I met Don years ago, and he actually helped me with my business when I was flipping at the time. And I thought I'd get him on and pick his brain a little bit and see what comes out. How you doing, Don?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm good. Hey, thanks for jumping on. Really
I'm
appreciate it.
looking forward to it.
Yeah, I was looking forward to interviewing you. I mean, you do a lot of things very well, and obviously, have got your own thriving, podcast and coaching business and mastermind. So anyway, I thought I would just kind of jump into it, and maybe we could start with you just sharing kind of a quick background, just what got you into the business, and kind of the ups and downs. Like we were talking before we started recording, both have the stripes of going through '08 and
Mhm.
having some major challenges. And I know you've gone straight up from there. So
Yeah, I mean, I'll give the quick overview, and if somebody wants to dig in deeper, there's quite a few episodes of the Flip Talk out there where I talk more about it in depth. So, but I started way back in 2003. For a couple of years before that, I had circled the idea of real estate investing and didn't necessarily have the confidence to take action. I think like a lot of people had analysis paralysis and thought I needed to have money or good credit, which I didn't have at the time. And it took me a minute to get in, and I've always been entrepreneurial. Real estate was just happened to be the widget that I fell into that allows me to be an entrepreneur and build businesses, and it's been an exciting ride. Early on, I made a lot of money, which you alluded to. 2008, I made a lot of money. I had never made a lot of money in my life, and I didn't manage it properly. I let it go to my head. In 2008 was a wake up call. I basically lost everything in 2008. In fact, at one point about the end of 2010, I ended up with almost $1 million judgment against me. So not only was I in a hole, but I was in a really deep hole, and kind of rebooted myself, reinvented myself, rebooted my business in 2012, and proceeded to just work on building a better business, one that wasn't a prison, and being a better business person from that point on. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
wow, so there's actually a few things that we can unpack a little bit
Right.
from the money going to your head. Maybe share a little bit about what that's. 'Cause I see a lot of guys, and I've experienced it as well. You have a couple, pretty nice pops, and make some dough, and then all of a sudden you think you're the man, and you at least in my case, I was not paying attention to some of my principles and I guess kind of rules of the business, because there were some things that I was like, these are things I'm not going to do, and then you get confident, cocky, whatever the word is, and then you
Mhm.
you go outside the lines a little bit, and guess what? Those are usually the ones that hurt you a little bit.
Well, you get arrogant, right? And that's part of it. When you never have money in your life, you don't come from people who have money, and you make large amounts of money in one shot. You don't really have the background on how to manage it. Money comes in, it's not all yours. Some of it goes to taxes, some of it goes to marketing, some of it goes to overhead, some of it goes to a few different things, and then what's left is yours. But when you've never made money before, you don't think in those terms. You think, I can go and buy whatever I want, do whatever I want, buy bottles in a club, buy a fancy car, and that's kind of the mindset. And then if you duplicate that, if you make the money over and over again, and you're blowing it like an idiot, and you don't have impact, you start to think that everything you touch turns to gold, and you're unstoppable. And that's kind of 2003, 4, 5, and 6 were markets like we've kind of seen just recently in the last 2 years, where you can make a lot of mistakes and run a really bad business and still make good money because the market hid your issues. And so the market hid my issues. It hid the fact that I was a bad business person. And it was really, really easy to make money, obtain money, borrow money. And I just thought it was never going to end. And I remember when the market was starting to turn, somebody told me that it was going to turn. And I had this attitude. I remember telling somebody, it doesn't matter. Put me in any city in the US, give me a couple of days and I'll make 10 grand without a thought. And I really believed that. I believed that it didn't matter what the market did, I was going to be untouchable. And I see a lot of that now in people who have not been through a market cycle, who've been in the business maybe a decade, or just the last handful of years, where they feel like it's never going to end. And I hope that it doesn't. I hope we never have a 2008. I don't think that we will, but it's still, you still should learn. You should stop and pay attention to those of us who've been through something catastrophic, and realize that it's really about running a good business, about being a good steward of your business, about making sure that you're a good steward of the money you're making, so that no matter what happens, you are here, your business is here, and that money is here basically in perpetuity.
Okay, that's a good segue. So the running a good business, and I,
Right.
again, going back to, I was reading your website. You're like, I basically made all the, all the mistakes in the book, and I feel like I'm the
Right.
same way. Paid the dumb tax many, many times.
Mhm.
So running a good business, what in the fix and flipping world, I mean, what does that mean to you, and what kind of advice could you share?
Well, running a good business first and foremost starts with being a good leader, and trying to understand people and conversations, that you're not a bully, and that you're not a bottleneck. Those are the first two things you want to do, is allow yourself to own your value and stand your ground when necessary without basically treating people like crap. Hire people that are smarter than you, better than you, and allow them to be successful without being a bottleneck and being in their way. And then making sure that you're making decisions that are best for the overall business for the long term, instead of just for yourself in the moment or for one employee in the moment, and that kind of thing. So, and that's probably not enough to say about it, but for a podcast, there's not a lot of time to really unpack it. And this is like a 3-day conversation, right? On
Right.
how to run a good business and be a good business owner. But really, it starts with you as a leader, and always wanting to be better as a leader, always wanting to grow as a leader, and always understanding that your job is to make sure that business is here 10 or 20 years from now. And sometimes that takes sacrifice, understanding that sometimes employees don't always grow with you. As good as they are, they may only grow with you to a certain point, and then it's time to bring somebody in better. Understanding that, just because somebody's your top producer, they might be a poison apple to your whole organization or culture. Understanding that you having to approve everything could be slowing your team down and creating a culture that doesn't allow them to really excel and make your company better. There's a lot of ways to unpack it, but it all starts with you.
What comes to mind there is, and I felt like I was pretty focused on the deal. And the one thing when, we met in 7-figure, I mean, the one thing that I quickly learned is like what you're saying, hire, any kind of hires when you're bringing people on your team, hugely important. And the thing that just stuck in my mind, like, tattooed is, hire slow, fire fast. It's really, that really helped me a lot, because I was, busy and impatient and just hiring people and not really, feeling 100% that this person is going to be a rock star on the front end. And then, man, the times, suck, and the dollars and everything else, and what that cost the business was, was huge. And then the other thing I was going to mention is the leader side. And really, I think a lot of guys experience that because they're more deal transaction focused versus kind of longevity of the business. And it's very deal specific, deal focused versus bigger picture, company kind of longevity, and then, being a leader to kind of get there. So anyway, those things definitely resonate. So most of my followers anyway are, fairly experienced, fix and flippers, spec builders, as well as we have a lot of people from just real estate community, real estate agents and whatnot. Assuming that, they've got some experience, this isn't like a newbie. What would you have them, if you're thinking like coaching someone or mentoring someone to kind of, take it to the next level, what kind of advice, or what should they be focused on from your perspective?
I mean, that's a loaded question. Whenever we try to sit down with somebody that is really their experience and trying to go to the next level, I like to spend an afternoon with them, understanding what their goals are. There's in this business, it's really easy to create a prison. I alluded to that before. It's really easy to create a prison, to create something you don't want. And understanding what your goals are, understanding ultimately what success looks like to you, what freedom looks like to you, and where you want to be in the next few years. Really the understanding of that helps to kind of put a plan together specific to you and how to accomplish that. Do you want to wholesale more? Do you want to fix and flip more? Are you wanting to build the ground up? What do you want your team to look like? Do you want to do 200 deals a year? Or are you happy doing 40 deals a year? Do you want to do more buy and hold? Like, all those things come into play in understanding how to direct and guide you, if that makes sense. I think if a coach comes in and does a blanket answer for any one person, you should run, from that particular coach, because what I want in my business right now today is going to be different from what, somebody listening is going to want in their business, and I've just seen too many people do what they've heard on a podcast, they see everybody else doing, and end up with something that they hate, number one, but number two, they don't know how to make it profitable, because they just created this big old machine with infrastructure and marketing costs and all kinds of craziness. So hopefully I didn't avoid the answer, but that's the way I look at it. Is I need to sit down with you specifically and understand what your ultimate goals are and help you paint that picture.
Yeah. And on that note, I mean, for people listening, check out Dawn on fliptalk.com, because you do have a lot of free resources, which is very cool. And then there's obviously the coaching and the mastermind, which are, amazing as far as, saving yourself from making a lot of mistakes. And your response makes total sense to me. I mean, obviously there's no one size fits all for anybody. Given I've been hearing this more and more, given the little, shift or whatever we're going through, correction in the market, depending on the, the area you're in. I've heard a lot of guys talk about, just deal flow. Deal flow is really kind of, dried up. I think this is pretty common when there is a shift in the market. You've got, maybe sellers that are a little more unrealistic, that the market has in a lot of cases corrected and gone down. There's definitely not the same offers and activity that we've seen over the last, post-COVID era. So what, and I get, you have to kind of understand the investor's business, but what do you think are, call it the low-hanging fruit? What are you usually a starting point for deal flow for folks? And let's just say, I mean, you kind of pick the level of experience. I mean, I would say, if I'm doing it maybe a couple a year and I've got a couple, real estate agents that are bringing me deals, is there a strategy, or, is there a way to kind of generate more deal flow that comes to mind?
Well, right now, I think, the best advice is to really do a few things. One is to really concentrate on your network. A lot of us have built our business building a network, like you mentioned, alluded to real estate agents bringing us deals and that kind of thing. And I think in the last handful of years, we haven't had to cultivate those relationships. And I think now is the time to really start to work on cultivating those relationships and continuing to make sure that we have that network in place, because the network is the free deals. We're not marketing to get those deals. And they ultimately, in a lot of cases, end up being very good deals, very lucrative deals for us. So number one, work on your network, make sure you're solidifying those relationships and continue to build new ones. Number two, you got to look at a few things in your operation. One is, if deal flow is changing for you, is it because, like, for instance, are you operating scared right now? Are you not doing the necessary marketing because you feel like the market's going to change, and are you operating scared? You got to look at that. So some people, when we ask the question, what's changed in your marketing, they're not marketing as aggressively because they're being a little more conservative with their capital, which is very, very reasonable. But that's probably part of the reason why your deal flow has changed. Are you looking at your team? Are you educating your team? What's happening after the phone's ringing? Has your team become complacent? I know my team, I had to work with my team and make a lot of changes because COVID had made a lot of good people complacent. And so what's happening after the phone rings? Are they taking things for granted? Are they still working as hard as they normally do? Or, do they accept that the sales cycle might have changed a little bit, and now we have to educate the seller a little bit more? And so therefore it's not a dead lead. Maybe it's a little, I got to put it in follow up and do a little bit more work on the lead. And so are we looking at the leads and giving them the grace that they need for some of the changes that are going on in the sellers' lives right now? And are we making sure our team's on board with that? Those are some of the things that I would be looking at in my operation right from the get-go, and working on in my operation right from the get-go. All markets have opportunities, and what's in this cycle, where are the opportunities? Maybe the blanket approach to equity lists, which a lot of people will mail to a cold call, aren't the best approaches. Maybe doubling down on niche lists, which is something we're doing, code violations, notice of trustee sales, tax defaults, water shutoffs, doubling down on some of the niche lists where people, because they will always have problems and a lot of them aren't going to be the ones that want to solve them. They stick their hand in the sand and avoid them. So instead of maybe doing a blanket approach, if that's not working for you and your organization, your particular market, maybe niching down a little bit and get a little more specific and finding sellers that are motivated might be the way to go. So those are a handful of things that I would look at in my operation. Most of the time, it's the first two things. They're either operating scared now and they're not marketing like they were for a minute, or they're not really training and working with their team to help their team battle some of the conversations and be better at some of the conversations they're having right now.
Yeah, that's great advice. So a couple of things that came to mind there. One, on the network, are there platforms that you recommend or that you use yourself to kind of, I mean, like I'm thinking of like social media, like is there a LinkedIn? Do you Facebook? Is it mostly just phone calling? What kind of, what ideas do you have around that?
I mean, nothing beats a face-to-face meeting or a personal conversation, going to the local meetups, and introducing yourself, meeting people, creating relationships, taking people out to lunch or coffee, picking up the phone and having a phone conversation are all things I've done. Calling people's bandit signs is stuff that I've done pretty regularly, calling other people's advertisement and marketing, I know it's not the nicest thing to do to somebody doing PPC, but Google We Buy Houses fast and just call through the people that are advertising and build relationships, and those relationships go a long way. So Facebook is great. I mean, there's a network there, but nothing beats meeting somebody in person and having that one-on-one connection. They tend to think of you, I believe, more often when it comes time to on who they're going to work with versus a stranger on Facebook.
Agreed. Absolutely. And then you mentioned some niche lists. I know this is another loaded question, but what's kind of let's just, say if it's a code violation or notice a default. I mean, do you, code violations a little bit different, but is it, use most of your coaching clients, are you advising for them to start doing like direct mail, or is it you start with something like just some outbound calling? I mean, what's kind of the typical approach there? I guess there is no typical, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, every market's different. So it's going to depend on the market you're in, whether you're in the Bay Area of California or you're in someplace in Georgia, on kind of like how you're going to want to tackle your marketing right out of the gate. It's going to depend on your budget and your runway, how long you can actually market with that budget. It's going to depend on some of the, how I would suggest you market. I love direct mail. If you have your process and your team dialed in, there's an infrastructure thing you got to do to make it work. And that's lead managers and different things like that in place. So ultimately the easy go-to is generally the cheapest marketing channel. The easiest marketing channel is cold calling. You can hire a cold caller and buy data and have them just drop leads into your CRM for a lot less money than you can for direct mail or PPC or some of the other channels out there. So generally my go-to advice is just pick up the phone and cold call yourself, or hire a cold caller for, $1,500, $1,800 a month, and just basically have them do it for you. Marketing as a whole, where the big mistake, all marketing works, every channel works, where the big mistake people really fall into, like I said, is what happens after the phone rings. Are they listening for opportunity? Or are they, acting and really, hearing what the seller is saying and acting on that? Or are they asking for the close? And a lot of times the answer is no on one of those things. So they're not really getting the proper sales process down within their organization. Or they don't have enough money. They're not putting enough money into it to make it effective. For instance, direct mail in any market, you can't spend $500 a month and expect it to be successful. You really got to, in certain markets, you're $5,000 before you get a deal on average. Some markets you're 8 or 10, some markets you're 2,500. So understanding what you need to invest in your market to really make that marketing channel work is important, and making sure you have the runway for it is important as well. And then I like to think in terms, I asked somebody one time, if you had $1 million a month to spend on marketing, and you knew you got a $5 return for every dollar you spent, would you spend $1 million a month? And the answer for most of us is no, because the infrastructure we have to build, we don't want to manage. So understanding what you want your business to be as you start to deploy that marketing is very, very important. Do you have the infrastructure in place to handle that marketing channel properly and profitably? And do you want to build it? And if the answer is no, then find a marketing channel that doesn't cause you to have to build it. If that makes sense.
Right. Absolutely. No, that's great advice. I think that's a huge nugget. And I've seen a lot of folks, and I've done it myself, is, not having a long enough ramp,
Mhm.
either, getting all, happy and aggressive, and, either the systems aren't in place, or you're kind of overspending before you're able to support it, or your processes, your messaging, how you deal with those leads is not, dialed in. So I would think that, in general, it depends on the operator, but you want to, kind of walk before you run type of thing.
100%.
Yeah. And then you mentioned cold calling. I guess, what are the top few lists that you would recommend someone focus on, and where do you get those lists?
So the go-to lists are generally equity lists. In most markets, those still work very, very well. That's the not owner occupied, has a certain degree of equity, usually 30%, 40% or more. Owner occupied, people who live in the property, and of course, again, equity, or some variation of that. Those are the typical go-to lists. They're very successful lists. You can also do the unknown equity list, which is, for whatever reason, they don't have data on whether or not the list has equity in it. That's if you have a decent budget in your market, because those are going to be fairly decent sized lists. If you're balling on a budget, again, the defaults, notice of default, notice trustee sale, tax default, code violation list are smaller lists that you can go for, and usually call through, a few times, within a very short period of time. So it really depends on your budget where you start. List source is a great place to go to get lists. Prop stream is another great place to go to get lists. There's a number of places. What's the other one? Property Radar is another great place to get lists. So there are a number of places to get lists out there. Some of them, list source is directly to the source. You're probably going to have the purest data. Unless you got some kind of hookup, you're going to pay a little extra for it. Prop stream is a monthly fee, but then you get X amount of, I think it's 50,000 records a month or something like that as part of your monthly fee. So it ends up being a little bit less expensive than the list source, but they're a data compiler, so their data is not always going to be the freshest. Property Radar is kind of the same as PropStream. They have a monthly, plus you get so much data. And again, they're a data compiler. So, but there are a number of places out there to get some good lists.
Okay, great. So switching gears a bit and getting into, let's just say, you find a deal. Have you adjusted? So there's always a kind of a weird, when you have a transition either way, it's like, I feel like there's a time frame that happens to, in this case, I think it's, maybe transitioning in a lot of markets to more of a buyer's market versus seller. It's been a, crazy hot seller's market for quite some time. And, one of the two sides isn't really, on where the market has, shifted, let's say. Have you adjusted your buy box? Have you, are you trying to, maybe discount, ARVs a bit, or, just trying to get better deals, or, how have you adjusted and I guess where I'm going with this is just on the analysis side. Like, how do you know a deal is still a good deal? Because, when the market's going up and to the right for as long as it was, I tell a lot of people that the market saved a lot of people, and some of us benefited from it, obviously, because it's not a perfect business. There's always surprises and things that'll come up, increased costs, delays, it takes longer to get it to market, whatever. But if the market's going up and to the right, you benefit from that. And I think we're gonna see the opposite start happening, where you make some mistakes and the market's not gonna save you.
So the answer is yes and no. I am a conservative investor, so I always look at what I can sell it for right now. I never bet the market. So when we're comping properties and the market's going up, I don't look at it and go, well, if I'm in it for 3 months, I can sell it for X. I look at it and say, well, if I can sell it today, what can I sell it for? What are the comps telling me right now? And we're kind of doing the same thing at the moment. What can we sell it for right now? And that's really how we're looking at it. I personally don't think this is going to be 2008. I think, like you said, it's going to be more of a buyer's market more so than a 2008 per se. So we do adjust for that in the sense that if we're going to rehab it, we want to make a little bit more on it. We want to have a little bit more room. But as far as how we're judging our ARVs, all right, we're judging our ARVs based on what the comps right now and backwards are telling us. So before, there was a point where I wanted to make 15% cash on cash return, which basically meant if I was $200,000 all invested in the project, purchase, rehab, holding cost, I wanted to walk with a minimum of 30 grand. Now there was a point where I got a little aggressive and I was willing to go down to about 11 or 12%, in the years past. And now I want to be about 20%. So, and that's just more so because we have time issues, supply chain issues, and reasons why we're going to be probably in the project a week or two more than we want to. And so I want to make a little bit more money on the project for that, more so than I'm worried about the market. But it also allows me a little bit more of a cushion. If I do have to make any adjustments on price, I'm going to be okay.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that does. And actually, I'm not saying, and I don't think, we're going to see another 08, but I did want to ask you, since you've gone through this, and I try to, I guess, impart some of my wisdom from going through that time, because there were some things that I'm just like, man, getting back to your comment earlier about the psychology and being scared. I was in, kind of scared / survival mode and didn't make some great decisions. What are kind of the top couple things you learned from going through that?
Well, I learned that nothing is guaranteed. I think that was the number one lesson. First and foremost, I should say the first lesson I learned was everything I touch does not turn to gold. In fact, 90% of the time it turns to crap. And I need to be okay with that. The second thing that I needed to know is that nothing is guaranteed. Not any day, not any minute, and definitely not any market is guaranteed. And so we should always be running our business, basically prepared for the worst and hoping for the best. We should always be running a good business. That was the other thing I learned from it. And then it's just paying attention, to what people are saying, what's going on around you, what's in the news, what the market's doing, what sellers are saying or doing, what buyers are saying or doing, and then adjusting accordingly. And I don't mean pay attention in the sense of scare yourself and run with the herd, but pay attention to know what the herd is doing so that you can adjust your business accordingly if necessary. And that's really, I would say, that the main takeaways for me from 2008. I wouldn't change it. It effectively made me a better person and a better business person for going through it. So I think I wouldn't wish it on anybody, but I think anybody who's going through the tool mode, as I like to call it right now, probably should go through their own version of 08, because it does make you better in a lot of ways. But ultimately at the end of the day, it's just more so just looking at what reality is, being a realist, I guess, and operating accordingly.
I think that, and I wanted to ask you about mindset, but that's a mindset thing. It's like, right. I just was listening to a thing on Jocko Willink, the Navy SEAL. He's got a podcast and he has this thing called Great, where it's like, one of his guys, when he's in the military, would come and say, this complete disaster is happening. He'd say, that's great. And the whole point of it was that gives us a chance to be better than where we're at today. So it's kind of a little bit of a shift on, if not necessarily, in our business, not everything's a disaster, but just, Windows got delayed a month. Okay, great. Mm-hmm. We're going to go find another resource or whatever. Mm-hmm. We're going to try and work on improving our position. I guess to kind of close it out, well, one of the things I wanted to ask you, do you use social media in, whether it's, network or just kind of getting exposure? I know you've got a couple different businesses, but, for the flipping business, do you use social media much? And if so, how and what platforms?
I do use social media a lot, obviously, with the podcast and being in the education space with the mastermind and everything like that. I'm on social media a lot. I'm not a lover of social media. I'm not going to lie. I don't like to live in front of a camera or behind a camera. I like to live my life and be in the moment. And so it's always been a struggle for me. So I can't say on the flipping side, I use it as well as I should or could. I've seen quite a few people use it much more successfully than I have when it comes to promoting their flipping and wholesaling business. I'm really more of I want to shake your hand and buy you lunch, or I want to shake your hand and do something for you, serve you in some way, so that you can see that I'm serious about doing business with you, and I can be that first thought. And so social media social media has a lot of great ways to get you out there and get you a lot of exposure and put you in front of people and really build your brand credibility. And I think your credibility overall. I know a lot of people who they meet with sellers and they're like, oh, you're the guy from such and such page and blah, blah, blah on Facebook. And there's some fame to that to a certain degree. But I think it's also the lazy way of building relationships, and at the end of the day, real relationships matter in this business and in any business. And in that way, I guess I'm kind of old school.
No, that's great advice. And that was a very self-serving question, because I'm trying to, with the podcast, I feel like I need to be out there. I was not a big social media guy at all. In fact, I was in tech many years ago, and I almost bragged that I was, fairly successful guy, but I just didn't use any kind of social. Back in the day, it was like LinkedIn. You had to, doing enterprise technology sales, you had to, be on LinkedIn. And I was like, I'm going to go reach out and create the relationships, develop the relationships, not focus on, I just thought at the time social was kind of goofy. And now I'm like, well, would have been nice to be building that network over, an extra decade, people knowing kind of what you do. So, but I mean, it's even good for me to hear that. I think a lot of guys, especially kind of younger, newer generation, think that that's the way to go about business, where it's like, making that personal connection. And it's not a terrible way to do it. I don't think. I think it does allow you to cover more ground, but at the same time, you want to get in front of people, and that's how you really kind of, I guess, cement the relationship. Yeah. So I guess to close this out, Don, I'm curious, like, what's your, take this whatever direction you want to take it, but what comes to mind for you is just, you've got a lot going on, and I'm always kind of marvel at successful folks in this business that do a lot of different things, whether it's a realtor, construction company, flipper, ground, whatever they're doing a lot of different things very, very well. So the question is, I guess, what's a day in the life of Don? If you want to share that, or I'm always curious, like, how do you, we mentioned mindset earlier. What do you do? How do you start your day? How do you get on the right footing? And how do you kind of, quote unquote, optimize yourself personally?
I think those are both great questions, and with both of them, I'll say I'm a work in progress on both of them.
We all are.
Yeah. A day in my life right now is really a lot of meetings, to tell you the truth. It's a lot of not getting in the way and directing people to do the things that need to be done. I think more so than being in the weeds and doing it. So the travel is a huge part of the component of what I do. I'm traveling quite a bit to different masterminds that I'm either a part of or that I'm running. And I really enjoy that aspect of it. So, but between interacting with students and members of the mastermind and educating myself, I'm in meetings with my team, my social media team, my marketing team, my real estate investing business team, and more so just making sure that I have a pulse on what's going on in the business, finding out what my team needs from me to get done, and making sure that I'm holding them accountable for what they need to do. And that's a huge component of what I do. That obviously doesn't take up a lot of time. I try to spend more time with my family now at this juncture. When I'm home, I try to be present when I can be present in the moment and not say no as much as possible. So that's a huge component of it. As far as mindset goes, that's always a struggle. I was just talking to somebody earlier. We all have that voice in our head that tells us we can't go to that next level, or, we're not worthy of this or that. And, for me, it's just, getting up and, starting my day with taking it easy. I want to take it easy. I want to take my time and getting my day going. I don't want to feel like I'm rushed or obligated to anything, because that's important to me. And feel like I'm kind of free to make my own choices on how I start my morning each morning. And so I do that. And that gives me kind of the mindset of I'm doing this stuff through the day because I want to, because it's my choice and it's my freedom to choose that, versus it's my obligation, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And for me, that's important to me. Some people, they need routines and rituals to hold themselves accountable, and having a ritual makes them feel good. For me, it's getting up with no obligation, first thing, and being able to get in the mindset that I'm choosing this life. I'm choosing the day that I have. I'm choosing the things that are before me, and I'm doing the things that I choose to do.
No, it's all about, I mean, we're energy, and,
Right.
not to get too woo woo, but, just however you do it to get in flow and not be
Right.
in a either overwhelmed, stressed, frantic state. I mean, that's like the
Right.
killer. And
Right.
I used to think that was my superpower, is that, I was like just pushing it and stressed and blah, blah, blah. And it just, it might work for a little while, but it's not a good long-term strategy.
Not at all. Not at all.
So close us out with, where would you want people to check you out, and where do we find you? What are, I know, if we talked about Flip Talk, but what would you like people to do? I'd love to have as many of our, my followers, check you out.
I mean, as always, they can listen to the Flip Talk podcast on iTunes or anywhere that podcasts are found. We also have the Flip Talk Rookie Playbook, which is a series we recorded a few years ago. For somebody that's new listening to this, start with week 1. And it really starts with, I have this crazy idea. I want to be a real estate investor. What do I do first? And it goes week 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth. I'm all over Facebook, Instagram. You can find me at The Real Don Costa. But really go to fliptalk.com. And we have some free resources there. You can apply for the coaching community if you want to be a part of coaching. And if you are an active real estate investor who has a functioning real estate investing business, then you can go to apply for the mastermind. You can either find that at fliptalk.com, or you can go to beinThisRoom.com and apply for the mastermind. So we're always looking for incredible people to join our community. And yeah, so that's where you find me.
Great. Well, thanks again for the time, Don. It was really great catching up with you, and, to continued success. And I will definitely send anybody that I work with your way.
Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate your time.
Okay. Talk to you soon.